Welcome to Conversation with Haych. We have the founder and overseer of NCM, New Covenant Ministries. We also have an author of Grounded, Building a Firm Foundation in Christ, a social worker by profession who runs Excel Midlands, which is a supported housing for adults. He has been featured on the BBC, in the Birmingham Mail, and most recently, he's missed a workout during lockdown. The apostle, the man of God, Mr. Emmanuel Adeseko. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on as well. Thank you.
I've said to people, who do you want me to kind of have a conversation with? Who do you want me to kind of get to know?
Yeah.
Apostle Emmanuel. Apostle Emmanuel. We need Apostle Emmanuel. I'm like, okay, I'll reach out. I know he's busy. No, just email him, get to him. But for those who don't know who you are, who is Emmanuel Adeseko?
Emmanuel, me, beyond all of this stuff, I would say I'm quite a simple guy, laid back, love to eat, love to play football. I would say, yeah, just calm, focused, motivated. I would say I'm a people person, but at the same time, I like my own space at times as well. So one of them, ambiverts, I think they call it ambivert kind of thing. What else? Support Arsenal. Favorite color is I know it's not going well already. But favorite color is blue. I'm just about helping people, to be honest with you. Love to laugh as much as the apostle this and apostle that. Those who know me know I like to be silly. I like to mess around. Because things are serious around me or quite serious around me all the time. So but yeah, cool. Calm, I said, vibrant, creative. I think I'm a thinker, definitely. That's me.
That's amazing. So when does the Christian journey start for you, and where does it start?
So I'm 32 now. I grew up in a Christian family. We would go to the Catholic, mass on a Sunday, and then we went to the Pentecostal thing. But I think where it really started for me was when I was about 12, just about 12 years old. Because I was having like these, I would pray, I would have these kind of experiences with God, which I didn't really realize were that significant to older life. But
yes,
my goal was actually to play professional football.
Okay.
So I was about 14 years old where I decided, okay, I want to follow this kind of thing. And I was doing quite well. I was playing for a team in Northampton, and then I got scouted to play for like the under-18s team like Northampton. And like during that time, my mum would take me to church, and I just remember, I don't know if you remember Dragon Ball Z and that kind of stuff. Yes. So like it was around at the time where that was on Cartoon Network and whatnot. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because school would finish, I'd go to training, or I'd go home. But literally what happened is I'd get home for about 4:00. Dragon Ball Z would be on at like 4 or 5. And then I'd spend a bit of time in prayer, then watch that. And this would be kind of my lifestyle. But then I started to have these kind of experiences with God, which I didn't realize until I started to tell my mom. And long story short, during that time, that's when you have like the raving, like the nappy nights and that kind of stuff. And it was like I was pursuing the football, but at the same time, I could literally feel God's call at that point, which was odd because I don't really have any Christian friends like that until I met one of my friends when I was about 15 and a half.
Yeah.
And long story short, my mum went to this conference, Benny Hinn conference. I didn't know it was Benny Hinn at the time, but there was something in me that was just desiring God, basically. And I just remember saying to God one time, like, listen, meet up with me, if you're really who you are, meet up with me. And that conference, I'll never forget it, because that conference, I don't know if you know Benny Hinn, but Benny Hinn's like, touch. And I never knew anything about like falling under the power of the Spirit. But that day, I experienced like the power of God for the first time that I can remember. And then from there, this kind of thing like started to really trigger in me, and I want to follow God and whatnot. And then literally from there, I become an usher. Somehow they tricked me in my church to become an usher.
You said you got tricked.
Because they said you'll make a good usher. So I joined the ushering team, and then from there they put me as a sound boy. And then during that time, I was just like, I need to do something for young people. I spoke to my bishop at the time. He said, yeah. I was about 16 years old. We started a youth center called Truth Youth Center. Met on Saturdays, 6 to 8. And literally what happened is that from there, Like one of my friends, this guy, still my friend till today, we play games, then we would preach the gospel, then we'd invite people for prayer, and we just would copy the older people. We'd lay hands upon them and pray, and people started to fall under the power of God and start to get touched. And, people got saved through that. And then from there, I went to university, started a campus fellowship, and then, the revival, my friends started a revival prayer meeting in Northampton, become like a revival gathering, become a church. I was about 18, they asked me to come and support. And then from there, and what's crazy is that during the first year of university, I had left Birmingham, Southampton, come to Birmingham, and, cut the long story short, there was different temptations, but for somehow, like, I knew that the encounter I experienced with God, that my revelation of God was real. It was not my mum's God or whatever. And then I spent a lot of time just like with God in the first year, and that really built a foundation. My friend had the revival meetings. I came down to help out. I ended up, being one of the leaders. It became a church, got into ministry like that. I was about 18 years old when I became a pastor. So it was early. I'm telling you, it was nuts.
18.
So that's kind of 18 years old. We was young, anointed, but it was a prayer meeting that became a revival, and then into a church full of young adults. And that was like the beginning of like what I understand ministry to be about. And, it was not orthodox. It was not, but I learned so much, and I'm still learning. Even the stuff that I'm doing now is based on some of the lessons that I've learned from those things that happened 2006, 2007. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So you spoke about the football journey. When did you kind of stop going in that direction, and just, was it like you stopped going in that direction and focusing on Christ, or was there kind of a tipping point for you?
Yeah. So it was nothing like, God is not against football, but it was a strange thing because I was pursuing that. And at that point, I could see, like, I was an usher in the church, and I started to share the gospel with people and start to preach and all this kind of stuff. And people were getting touched by God. And people kept saying, you're going to be a pastor one day. You're going to be a pastor. I'm like, no, I am going to play football until I'm like this age. I'm going to get married, get settled, and this is what's going to happen. And but I could actually feel the call. I could even me myself. So there was a point whereby I actually was playing for Northampton. I moved to play for Kettering.
Yeah.
And I was training with the first team. And long story short, the manager actually had been sacked at that point. So me and another guy was in the lineup to get into the first team. That didn't go through. And then I got injured. And one of those things where I was like, okay, I know that this has been a passion of mine, but I can feel that God wants me to really preach. So I really felt this was the way that God wants me to go. And it was a bit of a wrestle because ultimately I love football.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I could feel, just from the way some of these doors were closing and the way that people were coming to Christ, I was like, okay, let me move, and I did. And I still played football. In university, I played football. It was a good way to, when you're all right, people respect you as well. So that's another doorway. But it was so from about 18 years old, that's when I just said, I'm going to focus on, getting my education, and I'm just going to accept, because it was becoming very evident that, the way God was moving, that this was definitely something that I need to focus on.
Wow. And you know what it is as well, when I speak to a lot of people, they don't normally talk about doors closing first to open other ones. They always talk about this door opened over here, so I moved into that. But you said, I saw that door was closing, which meant I needed to pursue this thing that was clear and evident in how I felt and what God was calling me to do.
Yeah, it's and the thing is that some people are called to play professional football. I was pursuing it, and I was not doing bad at all. I was doing pretty well. The thing is that I could see how God was moving and how the young people were coming up and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was too obvious. So it was one of them bittersweet things where I love what God is doing, but also at the same time, I can see that certain doors are closing, and I have to embrace it. So, and then, what? At that point, it was a wrestle, but looking at how my life has gone, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I did,
So how do you get to becoming, the pastor and overseer of New Covenant Ministries. How does that, because you talked about the revival, you talked about you and your friend at the age of 18 being pastors, but how do you get to starting New Covenant Ministries?
Whew. So, I mean, during that period of time, I was a part of that church for like since 2018. So from 2008
Yeah.
till like 2011. So
Okay,
for
3
quite a
years.
bit of time, you know. Now the thing is that I was a part of the pastoral team in that church, was in university and all that kind of stuff. And at 2012, God started to speak to me about, new covenant, like this word new covenant. And it was hitting me. It was hitting me. And I'm like, okay, I'm studying it, I pray about it, but that was not enough. So at that point, because we was already in like the ministerial thing, it was a matter of, okay, they wanted to open up a branch in Birmingham, in other places and stuff like that. And I was like, Lord, please let me just be obedient and follow this,
Yeah.
Then God was really speaking to me about like this movement and that, and I was like, God, this battle now, God help me to forget this thing or put it down, but I could not.
Wow.
So 2012, when I was working as a youth worker in Northampton, and I was a part of I was like, at that point, the leadership changed over, so I was interim pastor for a particular season before the new couple came in. I was just, I had to just submit to it and start writing the vision down, of a movement. And as I wrote it down, more peace started to come. And I started to speak to my pastor, my bishop at the time. I was like, Bishop, this is what's going on in my mind. I'm not trying to say I want to leave the church or anything like that. But this is what's happening. And because, when you're young and you're in ministry, like there's a lot of pride. So, we was young, become pastors at like 18. My God, we're anointed. Look at, and we're not bad looking as well. Look at us, we've arrived. And then God humbles you. Then God humbles you and shows you that, listen, you're not all that. So I kind of was, by that time, 2011, I was really delivered from that kind of prestige of ministry. So I wasn't really desiring it. I was even quite tired as well. So that was not the time for me really to be starting anything. But that was the time that God was speaking to me. And I feel like God did it in such a way because I didn't want to do anything at that point. I didn't want to do like something in my own name because I tried and failed. And also I wasn't, like I said, God can humble you. I spoke to my bishop and he just said, listen, whatever God is telling you to do, whether you start a branch with our church, and that's why I thank God for Bishop David. He's an amazing man. He said, whether you start it there in that one or your one, I see your heart, just don't frustrate the grace of God. So that gave me a lot of peace. So I submit, and I was writing detailed plans of something I've not even seen, And then I did a master's 2013 for 2 years. So 2 years, and I was just traveling around, still connected to the church in Northampton. Then after that, I joined the church called Gateway Church in Birmingham. And, Pastor John, he was amazing. He said, listen, as long as we keep a relationship, you can stay here as long as you like and just grow and just when you're ready to launch out, you go. So literally what happened is that 2015 came, my other mentor was like, Emmanuel, it's time to start. I'm like, I'm not married. I've not gone to Bible school. Please, let me give me, all my insecurities, all my fears were like, just please, So, but what happened is I then, God had given me a book to write. So I'd written this book in 2015, July, August, September. And then I did a program based upon the book in 2016. And then what happened that grounded it based upon that. And people were coming. So I was like, oh my God, they're responding. They're responding. It sounds odd because when you want to start something, yes, you start by faith, but also there's the elements of you that, that have been humbled. So you just kind of, you're kind of delivered from the desire to try and be seen. So people were coming, and then it was so powerful. People were being delivered, and then they're like, what's happening next? It was an 8-week program. They're like, what's happening next? And I'm like, we'll see. But I know, and God knows that this is the plan. So long story short, we did some more Thursday meetings, and eventually I just accepted the 24th of September 2017. Let's just do it. And as soon as I accepted the decision to move forward, I felt this peace, and also I felt this power. It was like embracing identity. We launched it. We did it in the YMCA, and yeah, God has been moving. He's been moving. He's been moving in the people. We've moved from there now. We moved into a school. It was like 50 people that met up at the beginning, about 30, no, about probably like 10 people that met up in the Bible studies, then 20, then 15. It's about, over 100 and something now people that, are a family now, and we still got work to do, but it's a community, and I feel privileged to look at the journey, to be honest with you.
So how would you describe your almost 4 years as, overseer, and what have you learned about yourself as the pastor in that time?
Whew, I mean, you think you have the love of Christ until you start church. It's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing to see something that started off as a vision become reality, and just the way God has connected me and different people together. It's been so powerful, to miracles, testimonies, healings, family deliverance, so many things. People coming to Christ who are not Christians, people coming to Christ who, from another faith. I think it's such a privilege as a pastor to see stories and to hear stories. There's certain things that you don't get to see on, in a day job kind of thing. Challenges. It's been a challenge. Sometimes, there's been times where, I'm get tired, I don't always manage my time. So being able to manage so many different people, that's one thing I'm still having to learn, how to manage my time, because when you care about people, you also need to learn how to love them, but also put boundaries in place so that you can also manage yourself and my own self-care. I've learned the importance of humility, and I still learn that day to day, because ultimately, even though I pastor them and they learn from me, I also learn from them. And there's times whereby, even as a leader, you have to acknowledge that maybe I could have done something better, or we could have used another thing, and being able to apologize. One thing that I always have to be able to take is criticism. Criticism, because being a public leader, you don't always get the nicest criticism, but you have to learn to deal with it. And even though you don't get the nicest criticism, there's people who are around me, both friends and even people that I lead, that will offer criticism, and I have to be able to accept that in order for not only me to grow, for us as a community to grow as well. Because growth is not just with the people. I have to grow. I've also learned at the same time the importance of being assertive with vision, because with vision, God gives me the vision. And the thing is that people can also have their input and how they feel it's supposed to be. But you also have to be, at the same time, while you're taking criticism, you have to be very stern. Like, no, this is where I see us going and moving in that place. People management, again, having a vision of how to handle people. Also knowing what boundaries to put in place in terms of projects. Some projects just should go on for a small period of time. Some shouldn't go on for that long. So being able to change, basically embracing change. Some people have come to the church, they're not there anymore, and that's okay. That's okay. But being able to handle the change is sometimes a challenge. But I've learned so many things. I've learned the power of processing pain.
Oh, talk me through that one.
So there's different kinds of pain. There's the pain of discipline, where you have to handle doing things that you don't feel like doing. Sometimes I don't always feel like preaching. Sometimes I don't feel super spiritual, but sometimes you have to recognize that, listen, it's not about me, it's about the people, it's about God. And go beyond that. I recently lost, my dad passed away last year, so that was a challenging time. And I'm grateful that I had a time to rest, but that's still something that I have to be able to process, in the midst of encouraging others. Then there's the pain of disappointment, where sometimes when people, you lead those very same people and you encourage and build them, but sometimes they may say something or do something that was quite hurtful or harmful, whether it was intentional or not, and being able to handle that and love and continue on and protect, these are the kind of pains, the pains of people making choices that they shouldn't make, even though you've advised them. That can be a difficult pain when you see the consequences. So it's not an easy thing, but one thing I've learned about pain is that it can convert to power, it can convert to empathy, it can convert to experience as well, so it definitely has grown me as a person. I'm still growing, I'm still learning, about myself, but I think it's nothing like it, because you see people grow and change, and the church, that how it is now after 4 years, is not the same church that met in the YMCA, 20 people, you know, so many things. And I'm still learning leadership. You have to, with every stage of growth and kind of people, there's different kinds of leadership. One size doesn't fit all.
One of the things that you kind of touched on there, which I kind of want to just kind of get your thoughts on, is you talked about your father passing away. How did you kind of manage that? You said you took a break, but how did you manage that? Especially when you're trying to lead people, you talked about processing pain, but you still kind of got to do what God is calling you to do in the midst of that. So how did you manage that?
That's a great question. I think that's probably one of the most difficult experiences I've had in my life. I think anyone would say that for themselves. It's one of the most difficult experiences. So it's a very painful thing and quite a shocking thing. At the same time, you know, it sounds a bit odd, but you know, I was going to preach the Sunday. I was like, guys, this is you know, it happened on a Thursday. I was like, you know, they were like, are you actually okay? Like, Apostle, just like, but my senses kind of, you know, not even senses, but that kind of being in functional mode, being responsible for people. I had to just take a minute because this has affected me and my family. So I took the time, but in terms of dealing with it, one of the things I learned from having that time off was, even though, you know, I've been leading the church and doing ministry, you know, for a few years now, when I took the time to rest, God began to show me certain things about me that I didn't really notice until I took the time to rest. And I think those things were helpful, not just for me, but also for the people that I was leading as well.
Wow.
For example, some of them are not used to seeing me weak, or be me, you know, I'm the leader, so I'm the strong one. I'm the one who you go to. But right now, the pastor needs some time off because he's going through something, you know. So that was a humbling thing for me. And then also, you know, when people ask me how I'm doing, it wasn't that I was just loose, but I wasn't okay. I was hurt, you know. I was hurt. You know, God was keeping, but I was hurt. I was angry. There was different things that were happening within the family that was painful to deal with. So I had to be honest, and it brought me to a level of honesty that I think that I didn't even know I needed to get to.
Wow.
And also the people needed me to get to. And I still need to get there, to be honest. But I think one of the things that I learned from that experience is, you know, when there was other people preaching, the church was fine. And it was a testimony that it's supposed to be good leadership when the church is fine when you're not functioning.
Yep.
But as powerful as it was, I was feeling like, but I'm not preaching. I want to preach.
Really?
So God actually showed me that there were certain, dare I even say, insecurities. And I'm not telling you 5 years ago, I'm telling you last year, you know, insecurities that I thought I had overcome. But, you know, when you're in ministry and when you're known for doing a certain thing, you can subtly connect your esteem to that. So me taking the time off actually helped me to rediscover parts of me that I kind of didn't know were missing. It helped me to rediscover parts of me that I needed a bit of attention. And so then, you know, funny enough, when some people didn't know how to react. So some people knew how to react, some people didn't know how to react to me. So some people didn't contact me, some people did. And I don't even blame them. But at the time, because of where my emotions were, I felt a level of bitterness at times. I thought, you know, this guy hasn't contacted me. I'm just to be transparent. I felt these kind of things. And it wasn't to blame the people. It was just God was showing me a level of forgiveness I need to have also as a leader when people don't know how to respond to you when you're in a place of vulnerability as well. And then at the same time, going back to what I said, I also had to rediscover some things. And what's powerful is that when I did come back into preaching again and I started to have conversations, people kind of noticed that there was a greater level of, I suppose, authenticity that I had, a greater level of openness that I had. And I think that helped them even more to not only relate with me, but also to understand how to deal with life challenges, because I was thinking about dealing with the situation, not just as Emmanuel, but also as a leader. And there was times where honestly, because of some of the injustices that are taking place behind the scene, I felt like shouting, I felt like cussing, I felt like, you know, and not necessarily swearing, but you know, when you want to just tell someone about this, I felt these kind of things. I'm glad that I didn't react the way that my flesh was telling me to. But I think that what helped the people who I was leading and the people who knew me is that they could see that I was also being, in their words, a bit of an example in the process of grief. That it was okay for me to hurt, to cry, to be angry, but not to react in a way. And those who knew the stories and things that I was dealing with had a great level of respect. So that's what's been my experience of it. And I think that that's contributed to me being able to, I suppose, lead in this kind of style that I've been leading in.
And what's amazing about what you're talking about is God took the pain that you were going through to teach you so much about yourself, even stuff you felt you'd already overcome.
Yeah.
You had to go to a deeper level to then when you did come back, not just for the people, but for yourself.
Yeah. I think one of the things that the Bible says is that anyone who thinks he stands, let him take heed. No matter what level, position doesn't mean protection, and no matter what level or influence or rank or whatever you want to call it, we're still Christians, and I still have to learn Christianity and walk in that Christian walk. So I think when you're in a position of leadership, there's a lot of eyes on you. So you increase responsibility, but you lose rights. You lose the right to react. You lose the right to so that it can be more difficult because you're a goldfish in a bowl. But at the same time, just because that's the case, there's still not an excuse. And it was that kind of harsh reality that even though I may feel like responding in this way, I don't have the right to. And that really challenged my faith, because I think in situations like that, when it comes to pain, it really does ask you, where is your faith on? So that was one of my experiences.
So what advice would you give to, someone who is either in leadership, going into leadership, and especially leading the church? And then what advice would you give to people who are going into a season of having new leadership, or a congregation of people? Just two sets of advice for the leadership and from the congregation.
What I would say for a person who's coming into leadership is like a shoe that doesn't fit you. It's something that you have to grow into. You're growing into it day by day, and you need to give yourself space to grow, space to learn, space to make mistakes. You need to be able to take feedback, no matter what form it comes in, to take use of it. It's difficult, but it's helpful. You need to respect that there is a process. It doesn't happen daily. I love John Maxwell. He says leadership doesn't happen in a day, it happens daily. So being prepared to grow, be a student, no matter what level you're at, be a student. I think it's also important to recognize that authenticity inspires trust. The more authentic you can be, the more trust you can accommodate or you can gather from the people that you lead in your community. I think you need to also be a student of your experience. Everything you go through, be a student. What can I learn from it? How can I grow from this? No matter how difficult it is. In terms of someone who's going to be a leader of a community, leadership is literally that, it's influence. So you may have the position, but that doesn't, position gives you the right to lead, but it just gives you a season to display real leadership. Just because you have a position does not make you a leader.
Yes.
Leadership is, trust, authenticity. I recommend if you're going to be leading a congregation, you need to take time to really learn your congregation, learn the people, learn them. Don't assume that because you have the position that they trust you. They follow you because they have to at this point. But they will follow you because they want to if you invest in them. Never be too anointed to apologize. I think that's one of the most important things.
That's good.
Be anointed enough to recognize. And it's difficult. Even today, I still reflect on how I can improve, how I can learn and things like that. But it's worth it because there's a level of connection that you want to have with your people that it's beyond your position. You're no longer just leading them in terms of the position, it's life now. And there's a thing called reverse mentorship, where some of the people that you may lead may be so skillful in areas. There's people in my church that are so skilled in areas that I'm not skilled in. Being humble enough to recognize that leadership does not mean that you're ahead because you're better in everything, but it's because you know how to utilize things that are around you. And being humble enough to recognize that and honoring those people is so important. So I think that any leader who's new, you've got to be committed to education and committed to those things and be willing to build trust over a period of time.
No, that's good. That is amazing advice. What would you say to someone who is maybe not a leader, but they are currently in the congregation, kind of looking up to this new leader? What would you kind of say to them in terms of just small piece of advice?
Yeah. I would say that, it's really not as easy as it looks. Sometimes when you see someone leading, it's so easy. I promise you, it's easy to look and be like, they should have done this and that and the other. But just consider the fact that the leader may have 100 different people, 200, depending on the size of the congregation, that they're responsible for. There could be other voices that they're still responsible for. There's various dynamics that they have to account for. And there needs to be a level of grace. I think that what you can do as a new member, as a congregant, is to ask for feedback of how you can support. So there's clear expectations. What do they need from you? What's the expectation? What does it look like practically? So that you can know their expectations. And then from that, you can also say, communicate your desires in an appropriate way. Get around him or her or them to support. Pray for them, because honestly, there is a distinction. I've been a member of a church. I've also been a part of a leadership team, and being in this position now, there's a difference between being a leader in the church and a leader of a church. So they're going to take a lot of things that you may not necessarily see. I encourage you to pray for them. Any criticism you have, offer some compliments, encourage them, give them feedback, because, it's such a helpful thing to know the state or the relation that you have with the people that you are leading.
That is great advice. And the reason why, even though I said it's for, new leaders and people who are going to be a congregation for a new leader, that applies to anyone. That advice that you just gave may reignite something in someone who has potentially lost that fire to kind of, especially from a congregant perspective, to kind of look into themselves, to kind of not judge their leader for, seeing them as kind of, perfect, or every little mistake that they make. Oh, they did this, so I'm not going to come this Sunday, or I'm not going to listen to them preach when they do this. There's a real, what you said won't just help those who are new, it will help those who have lost that fire, that need that reignition, if that makes sense. So that's why it's key with that type of advice.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's such an important thing. I remember a time when I was a part of a church, and there was something that my pastor did, and because I was close with him, I was quite offended. I was quite offended. I didn't communicate it, and that's another thing. Communication. I didn't really communicate it, and I left the church. And I remember telling God that, I'm going to leave. And, I remember the Lord speaking to my heart, like, you need to go back to the church. Like, I was criticizing my pastor. It was actually me. And I read this book called The Bait of Satan. That book finished me. This book is by a man called John Bevere. It's about unforgiveness. God showed me how critical I was. And he actually, I'm so grateful I learned that lesson, because that was my training phase. Now I'm in I suppose, a reigning phase now. I see when people react to things that maybe I do or other leaders do, or not necessarily in my church, that things that people may do, their partners, their friends, their parents. And I said, listen, you sow now, you reap later. Think about how you respond. And ultimately, when you give that kind of grace that you want to receive, you definitely do receive it in a powerful way. It may not be from the same person, but definitely.
Now, what I want to kind of speak about, because you spoke about, your father earlier, but we've been recently featured on BBC News, in the Birmingham Mail. You've been having your IG lives. But what kind of fueled you to kind of start talking about, the COVID-19 vaccine? What kind of made you be so vocal about it?
It was one of those things where I didn't plan this. It was something where, as probably yourself, you have conversations with people around you about it. But I just really feel that God catapulted me into the conversation, because I was invited to a roundtable discussion with some members of parliament to share about it, what our thoughts were in terms of issues in the community, and the uptake and whatnot. And then there was different reporters on that Zoom, and then one of them literally asked me if I could be interviewed, and I was interviewed, and then there was several others, and then by the time I knew it, this was on the BBC, it was on this. I've been contacted by pretty much most of the big
media outlets.
Yeah. And I was praying, and I was even, God, do you want me to be doing this? And I had peace about it, but I also recognized that when you start to communicate about this, it's going to have its own backlash. And I have had some backlash, and I've had some responses where people
I can imagine
being paid by the government, or that I'm doing this and that. And I think because the way that it was portrayed is that maybe I'm trying to coerce or urge people, but ultimately what I've been trying to do is just share information. So it wasn't my plan, but I do sense God really being involved in this, because the amount of hope that people are getting, people are receiving ministry, on my Instagram and messages, there's things happening behind the scene, which is opening the door to preach the gospel. So it wasn't something that I would have thought I would be talking about or be involved in this way. But again, because of obviously my dad passing away and the connection between it, it seemed as if people have been more inclined to listen to what I have to say. So I've been really prayerful that, Lord, I am here. It's not about me. Whatever you want me to say and do, I'll say and do it. If I don't get a good response, fine. If I get a good, it's not really about me at this particular time. But that was really the main thing. And I found that there is a lot of mistrust, a lot of fear right now. So if God said something to me that was really quite profound, he said, I said, God, why should I do it? And he said, Emmanuel, the reason why I want you to do this is because the silence of some of my people is deafening. And that hit me, because I was thinking, wow, I know that some church leaders are speaking about this, but it really opened my eyes to the need for the church to really talk about things that are controversial. And I just felt that that's what God is saying for me, to just try and represent in whatever capacity I can, so that there's a representation for the church, and again, for I suppose the culture as well. Yeah.
Us in terms of African Caribbean society, there's a lot of things that go around in terms, the COVID-19 vaccine. You get the WhatsApp nurses and doctors who want to send this misinformation. It does this, it does that. Why do you think we, as a, as you said, as a culture, and even as a church, because even in the church, we're very skeptical. Some people say if you get the vaccine, it's going against what God's asking you to do. And I've heard everything. I've heard all these types of opinions. Why do you think we're so skeptical about the vaccine?
Well, just from the church's view, one of the biggest topics that this is connected to is eschatology, the study of the end time. And, when you look in the Bible, Galatians chapter 5, I think it is, talk about one of the works of the flesh, which is witchcraft. When you translate that word, witchcraft is pharmakeia. You have Revelations, I think it's like 18:23. It says that mystery Babylon, she had deceived the people with her sorceries. You translate that word sorceries, it means pharmakeia. That word pharmakeia is where we have the word pharmacy. And so there's been this underlying thing between the church and medicine for a long time. But the thing is that when you look at the origin of it, that pharmakeia or pharmacy, when they did their worship of idols, they used different potions, and it still happens now. We still have witch doctors and things like that, potions and divination and things like that. So the church's connection to it and interpretation of it has always been a contested thing. Now, I don't believe that if you have paracetamol, then you are inviting the spirit of pharmakeia. Do you know what I mean?
I get you.
What the issue is that people interpret end times in light of biblical prophecy. So the church has been guilty many times of saying, 2000 is the end of the world. There are different denominations saying that, the television is evil, the electric guitar is evil. Women wearing trousers. How far do we want to go? So in terms of the church, this issue is connected to people's faith and interpretation of end times. At the same time, our interpretation of end times can either make us lazy in terms of involving ourselves in affairs of present life, or it can make us get on and address it. If you feel that, listen, Jesus is coming back, let's just leave it and stay exclusive, then that's going to be how you handle issues in community. But if you're listen, we are people who are here to initiate. The Bible says in Genesis 1 that the light shall be for signs and for seasons, and that we're the light of the world. That means that we are the ones that should be initiating seasons and things like that. So I believe that school of thought, that we are the ones who should be influencing and addressing things, because there needs to be a representation. We may not all be the leaders or the business owners, but we need to be a voice in these prayers to share. If it's not God's commandment in terms of what he says expressly, it should be a concession, advising people to make the choices. So that's one thing, eschatology. Another thing is, because I think there's genuine fear. I think people are fearful of sharing their opinion, because there is censorship that is going on. That is actually, I think there is genuine censorship of things, because there is also fear, not just in the people, there's also fear of the government as well, where they may be thinking that anything that is, and that even seems like anti-vaccine needs to be shut down. Some reasons why Black people, especially Black people, are not taking it is because of the historic injustices that have taken place, both in Africa, even in America. One of the most recent runs that people, the Tuskegee project, that experiment is available. People can see it's real. It did happen. So we have the historical trauma of injustice with Black people. We have George Floyd. We have law enforcement and racism. So why wouldn't there be queries about racism, prejudice, and medical or health care? So there are real reasons, but there is misinformation. There is genuine things that are going out there. Some long, voicemail messages. No, there is some conspirator. There is people that are like chopping down, these electrical posts, because of this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of reasons, and then again, some of the things with the government, it's never happened before.
Yep.
At the same time, when you have lockdown that's put on and put off, put on, put off, people start to question, if you're putting lockdown on and off, people are dying. Are they no longer dying anymore? So people get confused, and that mixed messages breed suspicion. What's going on, guys? And so because there hasn't been full openness from government in certain things, that's also fed into the whole thing. So for me, these are some of the reasons why, people are not trusting, people are hesitant.
So what advice would you give to people who are, hesitant, fearful, all this misinformation that's going on? Obviously, we're looking at the government and we're saying, hold on, we was locked down in March 2020. It looks like we're going to be locked down in March 2021. It's all these kind of things that go on. What kind of advice would you give to those people in regards to the COVID vaccine and, getting the right information around it?
Yeah, starting from a Christian standpoint, as a believer, life is so short, and ultimately, because life is so short, tomorrow isn't promised. We are confident that we have an eternal hope in Christ, and so for anyone who's listening, I would say to you that whether you have the vaccine or not, the first thing is where is your hope eternally? Because ultimately, everyone is going to have a funeral service, and with us, we have faith in Christ. He's an eternal promise, and we can know him now. That's the first hope I'd offer people. In terms of moving into the practicalities, I would say to people fundamentally, where is your education coming from? Can you spend a bit of time personally to gather resources? Go on the NHS website, speak to there's a united community of doctors. I can't remember the name of them, but there's doctors who have done, you can check it out on YouTube, who have done an analysis of the virus and also of the vaccine. It's thorough, and they and they're Black as well, especially if it's people who are Black and they're hesitant. So they have got extensive research that will help you satisfy some of your questions. I think they need to ask their GP some questions. They need to ask the NHS some questions, even calling them up and asking questions. I think that they should take a list of some of these things that are, whether they feel like conspiracies or they feel like they're factual, and present this information so that we can have it debunked. I think ultimately there should be a need to be practical about keeping yourself safe as well. Like, don't just say that, you don't believe in it, or it's very real. Exercise, taking, even if it's 30 minutes a day, eating healthy is a good opportunity. That's why I've been trying to exercise, like that was one of the things that helped me, especially emotionally, with what I exercise. It's a good release. Mental health is a big thing as well. You need to be keeping your mind active. We're not designed to be in the house. I think even though you can't be around friends and family as much as you would like to because of lockdown, plan fun, like plan engagements, plan relationships, meetups online, like plan those things so that you don't be isolated. 'Cause it's so easy to get into a place of isolation. And when you're in a place of isolation mentally, that's when you can start to regress. You can start to overanalyze things, and be open-minded, be practical in this. What if I'm wrong? What if I don't have all the information? That's the standpoint I have to take daily, because we don't know everything. And I think if you have that, that will help reduce the level of tension. And then also, the question is that what is the main problem? Some people, their issue is not even the vaccine, it's some historical racism that they've had. And no matter what you tell them, and I'm not saying that there is racism, there's genuinely racism, it's real. At the same time, I am a Black man. I ultimately am a Christian first. I'm a Black man, but then also I don't see myself, and I don't want to sound odd. I'm Black, my skin is Black, and I'm not ashamed of it, but I also don't see myself as a victim. And I think that I cannot allow myself to see myself as a victim. Otherwise, people can try and victimize me, but I will not see myself as a victim, because that victim complex can create a barrier to entry into moving forward in my purpose, my destiny, my lifestyle. So these are kind of things that I would recommend people to be doing to move forward.
And what I hope from the great advice that you've given is that people take that and run with that advice in terms of finding the information, understanding for themselves, not relying on, group chats or relying on what this person said in the news, but really taking the time, as you said, for themselves to find out what is really going on, information behind it, and then they can make a decision backed with the information that they required initially. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's got to be space for disagreement. There has to be space. When someone says, listen, I'm not taking that, or someone says, I'm taking that, I'm not even, the platform that I have is not even to do anything else but to share information, because I feel that once you have that, the knowledge of truth is the introduction to responsibility. You're now responsible, and that's the way I've been approaching it.
I want to move away from that for a minute, and I want to talk about, professionally, because you talked about at the start, you did a master's in social work. What kind of pushed you, or what kind of led you kind of going into that field?
So I did, once I finished my undergrad, I did business psychology and business, and then I did, I worked 3 years of youth work, and I loved working with people. The job was amazing. I worked for a Christian organization. We did worked in youth clubs. I was responsible for a whole district, but the hours were not sustainable. I would be working so long. So I wanted to work with people, but I didn't want to work late hours, and I wanted to engage, because I think that's one of my skills.
Yeah.
So funny enough, it was my mom. She was like, why don't you do social work? Social work, social work, and obviously your mom advises you, you're like, But I took time to think about it and examined some of the things that they did. And I thought, this is actually, social justice. You can challenge things, and then applied for the master's, got an unconditional offer in start. And then I got in, and as I got in, and I've only worked in the fostering and adoption area. And I enjoyed it. I will be honest, I did enjoy it. You got to be a voice for a child. You got to get involved in families and advise them. And, it opened up, it felt so natural. And I'm so glad, because the knowledge of social work and working with people and all of the things that I've seen has been so helpful to pastor a church, because there's nothing that obviously, we see new things, but I've seen so many things in social work that that experience has helped me with pastoring, definitely, and relationships. So
what was the most surprising thing when you got into social work? What was the most surprising thing that you were just like, wow?
I think one of the things that I was surprised about was the issues that were going on in the society. Now, I started, and I saw a referral for a child coming into fostering, like a child being, and the child that was abused, there was this, that, and the other. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, this is my first job, like the first week, and I showed my manager, I'm like, this is, because you have to rate it on what level of risk it is, medium risk, low risk, or high risk.
Yeah.
I put it as high risk. I'm like, this is all high risk. She's like, Emmanuel, no, it's not high risk at all. It's low risk. I said, are you reading the same thing that I'm reading? You're not reading. And you know what? I realized just from that how much is going on. So now looking back, it was low risk, because there's some higher risk things. One of the things that really, really was touching for me was when there was a young person who, I think he was about 15 years old, and You know, he was taken from like sex trafficking. It was sad. You know, a boy, he was in, and it was that hearing his story, like he lost both of his parents and literally had to pretty much prostitute himself to get by, because his particular people that were looking after him, that's how they made their money. You know, and he worked in he was promised to be like a bar, to work on, like, you know, fish and chip shop,
Yeah.
to do something like that, but in a more glamorous way. He was brought in, and he was a you know, and this is like 15 years old. I mean, he wasn't 15 at the time, he would have been like 12 or so. But the story was so deep, and you know, he was saying it with not much emotion because he's had to just deal with it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and he was applying for you know, asylum seeker and all that kind of stuff. But it was a bit difficult to hear the story. You know, it wouldn't be helpful to say the whole thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
You can picture.
Yeah. And I think everyone's kind of, you know, as you said, everyone that's listening can picture what you're talking about.
You know, so stuff like that. It's the transitions as well can be a bit of a surprise, because when a child gets adopted, the transition period can be between 4 days to like a week. You know, and if you imagine a child's been with you for maybe a few years, and that transition from the foster carer to the adopter, that transition can take 5 days. You know, they can come into the house, see the things, then transfer the attachment, and then the foster care. That can be an emotional thing, because that child has been with that family. So that's a surprise. I think one of the surprises is the caseload of the social workers.
Yeah,
the children's social. They have got a high caseload.
I hear this a lot.
Yeah, I was a fostering social worker, so my caseload was not massive, but their caseload was unrealistic. I mean, it depends, you know, what area of social work, but theirs was high. You know, it was high, to be fair.
So how did you manage that, considering you went into social work, you pastoring at the time, obviously not so much into New Covenant Ministries, then you go into New Covenant Ministries still doing kind of social work. How do you manage your space mentally in all of that?
Yeah, that's a question. Even till today, I'm still even asking myself the question. I'm asking the question myself. You know what? I don't want to sound like super spiritual, but it really took God's grace, because I started the church 2017, but I worked as a social worker from 2015. The thing is that it really did put pressure on my time management. I mean, I would be working in the daytime, and then I would go home, I'd do the Bible study, then I'd do some paperwork from work, I'd prepare for the message, I'll be speaking to people. I mean, looking back, I'm like, wow, it was never going to be sustainable for a long time.
Yeah.
But I just thought that, okay, God, this is the thing that I'm doing. I need to plan a transition. Honestly, it wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy. I had some good friends that I could just say, listen, I'm tired. You know, I'm tired. But my why was what was propelling me. So I think having a good why, having a good reason beyond where you are. I think my manager started to note, because my manager's like, oh, you've written a book. Oh, you're a bit of a celebrity. Even then, and she's like, oh, you're a celebrity. I feel like I'm visualized as a celebrity. And you know, it wasn't easy to balance, because work was work, and then like the pastor really was my calling. This is something I do for free. And as much as I enjoyed social work, I knew that social work was only going to be for a period of time. So, you know, I had to set a strategy that, okay, I'm in this, I've got to give it as much as I can, save money, I need to get a strategy and all that kind of stuff, because I'm not going to be able to sustain this for the long run. But ultimately, the main thing was having my why, was planning my gears. So with the ministry, I didn't do it full force. I was doing a certain pace, and I was focusing on building leaders, have leaders, people that can lead, so that if I get tired or I need a bit of time to rest, or even if I don't, they can help bear the responsibilities. That was my goal at the beginning. And that's why I think for the church that, you know, we've still got, you know, developments, but I feel that there is leaders that I can trust, that are capable. You know, that was because, number one, all glory to God. Number two, they themselves need to take credit for it. And I feel that the focus was to build leaders so that they could actually recognize that, listen, and that to me helped in the transition. You know, that was a real big help.
So how do you transition into Excel housing?
Okay. So Excel, it's Excel Midlands.
Excel Midlands housing.
So one of the things that I've always seen in my life is not just, I don't see myself as just a pastor. I've always seen myself as like someone who would be able to, influence the community. I've always, Bible schools, hospitals, orphanages. I've always, wanted to not just be the Christian who you pastor a church and you're kind of like isolated, you're not bringing solutions. So my vision has always been, I wanted to have support and housing that can help people, and property, but housing that can support people. So 2018, I started, I got my first rent to rent. I took a risk and rented a property, and then like a long-term lease. And I didn't really even know that was like the name of the strategy. Because the option was either I buy one, or I do it this way. And I thought, the amount of money that I'm going to need to like get the house into order, let me do the lease, because at least I can, if it doesn't work the way I want it to work, I can just end the lease, pay a bit of and come out. But it was amazing because started 2018 and started to house some people in the house, and I started to see the return of that. So that really inspired me that, okay, this is going to be a help to transition into ministry as well. So I was doing that at a certain speed. And what's so crazy is I left my previous job, and then I worked in an agency role and there was a situation where it's crazy looking back on it. There was a child who was going to be adopted, and the child made a request to be placed with parents from heterosexual. For some reason that was not listened to, and I'd asked the question, why is it, and that it erupted, and they felt like I don't know, I think they thought maybe I was colluding, or they thought I was prejudiced or something, and they ended my contract. They literally ended my contract. They said, listen, and maybe I didn't handle it aggressively. For
asking a question to what the child had asked for. You asked a question in regards to that.
Yeah, and so the thing is that I know it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Now this was the weekend of our church's 3-year anniversary. So that week was wild. It was that happened on a Tuesday. The Thursday they said that so I asked them, why did this, like, it doesn't, I don't understand it. Are you ending my contract because I'm challenging or questioning something? I'm not even telling you my view. I'm telling you what they said based upon the feedback that foster care has given. For some reason, I think there was some political thing involved in that.
Okay.
And it is so obvious, but I said, you know what, God, this is insane. This is insane. Because that year I was like, God, I know you're calling me to take some steps to get into full-time ministry, do the business or whatnot, but Lord, how do you want me to? I thought maybe it'll be like the next year or whatever. It didn't happen that way. So I was a bit annoyed because of the injustice, but at the same time, in that weekend, we had the anniversary for my church, but I did more for my business over that weekend than I probably did in a few months. Somehow I got the house full of tenants, and then I was having another conversation with a landlord to, the money to then have another contract. So by November, I had 2 houses. One was full, and then the next one, I was filling it up. Well, I was just getting it ready to be refurbished and whatnot. So, wow. And then, my some of my leaders was like, listen, I said what happened. And I was like, listen, we know that you've been receiving a donation from the church to support you to an extent as the pastor, but you need to be put on an actual salary. And from there, we had the conversation, prepared the church, and it was always going to happen at some point, but it was just the way it happened.
The timing
was, and so from September, that's what I've been in ministry full time, doing the business, and and there's some opportunities coming up that I'm just working on. So
wow,
it was faith, the questions come to your mind, but I thank God that I took the step, because it's no greater feeling than to be focused on what you're called to do.
That is amazing. Like, seriously, that whole week, because that Thursday, you must have been like, huh?
Let me even add the thing. So that was a Thursday. I was like, eh? And then obviously the conference is going on. It's about to go on. And I'm like, Lord, I need a word from God. A word from God. So if you listen to the thing was called Get Out of the Camp, I think, 2020.
Yeah.
And then so my some of the guys in my church, absolutely love these guys, They said, Apostle, can you come out with us? Let's go bowling or something like that. So on the Friday, I went out. Now, this is the thing. I went out on the Friday in the afternoon. We went bowling and just talked. They just wanted to like encourage me and just say, listen, it's going to be okay and whatnot. I get home, right? I open the door and my house is trashed. I go into the house and my laptop that the church bought for me was taken. There's also like a work laptop I was taking as well. My house was broken into. They stole my laptop, stole my PlayStation, and I didn't even know, because the door was open in the front door, because I was going to go into the house, get something, and go to the property. Long story short, I thought I heard a sound. I thought someone was upstairs, so I just called the police. I was going to go upstairs,
When you could handle it, yeah.
Upstairs, and then sense come back to me. Reason, I was like, it's not worth it. So called the police. I told them that I think someone's in the house. It's been broken into. And I think their response. One thing I'll say about the police, their response time was rapid. I think they got there in 5 minutes. They got there in 5 minutes, went in the house with tasers drawn, went upstairs, cleared the whole house. There's no one there. But you imagine the Thursday before, house is broken into. The Friday, Thursday before I lost the job. Friday, my house is trashed. So this is like, Lord, I'm like, God, if I'm not Job, then what's going on? So it was crazy. What? Some of my guys in my church are amazing. I told the guy who I was with, him, like 2 or 3 of them, they come help me board up the house. The forensic came. I just had to learn, or what I say, relearn, just trust. Like the laptop that I need to be doing my business, the laptop that I need to be doing, just mad. But that's why I thank God, because literally insurance covered everything. They sorted it. The door, everything was covered. In fact, I've got a newer version of my laptop. So, and I'm, by God's grace, making more than what I was when I was actually working. So, that's why I'm like, God, however you want to do it, just do it.
My next question was going to be, with all that you've been through, was there ever a time you felt difficult to overcome? But after what you've been talking about, I don't even know if that question is really relevant at this point in time.
No, I think it's a good question, because I think that sometimes when people look, people can assume that, maybe because of social media, or maybe because you articulate yourself, that you were never, maybe not confident, you never had to go through things. And that's just a lie, because for me, one of the things that what's quite funny is that I wasn't able to really project my voice very well before. I wasn't that confident. It sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy. But
sorry, Apostle. You.
I know. My mom will tell you. I promise you. Because she say, you talk from here. So yes, I've had to learn to speak better. That's one thing. I think one of the things that I think overcoming. Obviously, I've mentioned my dad passing away is a big thing. I think past mistakes. I think in my earlier years of ministry, I had some, you have scenarios where you have some, moral failures, where, you have a situation with a partner, and, you do things that are wrong. And it's not that it's like proper bad, but, when you're young, like 18, 19, you do some immature behaviors. And I think that having to forgive myself from those things and move on, was a challenge, because sometimes when you make mistakes in the past, whether it be through pornography or through this and that and the other, to accept that that's not who you are anymore. You can out of the action, but sometimes the emotional impact of what you have done or what's been done to you. So I think that accepting myself, I think I had imposter syndrome. But imposter syndrome is like, do I
belong here? Yeah.
Do I belong here? Do I belong here? And I think that it was something that I had to really deal with at different stages of my life. I think definitely before I started the church, and I think there was a time, probably like the second year in, probably just about the second, just what year and a half, second year, like all this stuff was happening. Am I like, is me? Am I supposed to be?
Wow.
I know it sounds crazy, but these are the things, that I've had to, and that's why I think it's so important to have like trusted people. Yes, talk to God, but I think it's important to have trusted people. I've got some good friends. Some of my mentors really did help me with understanding why I was thinking that way. So now it may seem like I'm cool as a cucumber chilled, but it's been a journey, man.
Yeah.
Learning to learn to be more authentic and to not necessarily try, just to be. But what I would say is that if you are going through something, just know that you're going through something. That's what it is. You are going through something because you will always be becoming. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm learning now. What is it going to be like next year? What am I going to be like? So I'm literally just trying to get feedback from people to try and improve, and also to try and look at what other areas I can overcome so I can be a better version of me.
That is great. You've articulated it perfectly. And what you said as well is it's a journey. People may see what seems like the current result, but they don't see the journey to get there. And this is why it's important for me to kind of have these types of conversations, especially with people like you, like a man like yourself, where I see the results of where you've got to, and so do a lot of other people, and they see what you produce, and they see what the content that you create, and they see how you preach, and they see how you pastor, and they see how you oversee people, and they see how you are able to, as you put it, engage with people, but they don't see the progress, they don't see the journey, they don't see how you got to that point, if that makes sense. They don't see the trials or the tribulations or the mental aspects of getting there. And I think it's very important to not only talk about those things, but to celebrate that you got through that journey, but celebrate where you are now, even though there's so much more to come. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. That's why I love to, I felt it's such a privilege to be on, your show, what you're doing, because I think that these kind of conversations help people to understand that, listen, we're all at a stage of our life, and we're all becoming, and you shouldn't disqualify yourself or write yourself off. And I think that if I didn't start this church, I get messages at times, and they were so encouraging from people, I thank you for starting this church. I thank you for doing this, where would I be? And I don't take the credit for it, but it just helps me to understand that, if you got a vision, an idea or something, don't disrespect it. Don't despise small beginnings. Take a step. And one thing I would say is, don't be afraid to make mistakes, man. Like, you have to be willing to make mistakes to make anything.
My last question, which is what I ask everyone, with where you are in life right now, what advice would you give to yourself?
As in right now, for myself?
Right now.
Okay. I would say to myself to ultimately to keep focused. I would tell myself, I would tell myself, well done, for some of the things that I have had to overcome. I would say keep seeking feedback. I think that's one thing that I need to keep doing, because sometimes the more exposed you are to public eye or whatever, you need to seek to improve, because sometimes you can have people who tell you things that they think you want to hear. I would say that I would just need to be bold about what I'm doing, and to ultimately keep God first. Like, don't, because that's even how I've even got here in the first place, to keep God first, never make it about myself, and to rest. I'll tell myself sometimes I don't do that well. And lastly, I would say just to continue to have fun, to not take things seriously, and sometimes joy. That's what I'd say to myself.
Apostle, I'm going to call you Apostle now. I appreciate your time. I appreciate us having this conversation, and I know people are going to be blessed by what you said, and I hope when you look back on this, it gives you some sort of like encouragement for wherever you are at that point in time in your life. So I want to say thank you again for your time. And this has been Conversation with Haych with Apostle Emmanuel Adeseko. And guys, we'll have more content for you coming very, very soon.